Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of making an 1840s dress. Previously I made a corded petticoat and tucked petticoat, which I'll link down below. If you haven't seen part 1 of making the dress, it was about the construction of the bodice. I will also link that below. The second part is about making the Bertha and the sleeves, which finishes up the bodice. I left off the other video after boning the bodice and finishing the seams. Next, I draped the Bertha on the stand. Berthas were popular and varied in the 1840s. I decided to go with a gathered lace based on a lot of different plates. I will link my 1840s Pinterest below for reference. This lace was actually what inspired most of the dress. This was originally purchased around 2 years ago from Etsy for a different dress, but it didn't work out, so it stayed in my stash. The Bertha has one seam at the shoulders and is cut on the fold at the front. I also used some of the same cotton to interline it as I did with the bodice. After cutting these out, I basted the two pieces together and treated it as one. I sewed the shoulder seams and then flat felled them. I hemmed the bottom edge by turning it inwards twice and then whip stitching it down, being careful to only catch the cotton. However, in the end this doesn't matter too much as the Bertha is then covered in lace. I gathered down the lace by running it through my sewing machine on the longest stitch setting and a high tension. Then I pinned it to the top of the Bertha and sewed it down by machine. I then gathered the second tier of lace, making it longer than the first by sewing the gathering stitches closer to the top edge. I pinned it and then hand sewed it down, rolling the raw edge under as I went. I was afraid this edge would be a little visible, so I decided not to top stitch it. The Bertha was now essentially ready to be attached to the bodice, so I went ahead and made piping. I did this by cutting bias strips of the blue satin, which were folded down the middle where the cord was inserted. I used the same cord as for my corded petticoat. Using a zipper foot, I sewed as close to the cord as I could. At this point I realised I'd forgotten to add boning to the centre front, so I quickly added that. I used my pinking shears to trim away the excess net from the top of the Bertha, and then stay stitched the neckline of the bodice. I should have done this earlier, but only recently have I discovered the advantages of stay stitching, so it's still not quite in my workflow. Then I pinned the Bertha on to the right side of the bodice. I basted it and then added the piping on top, basting again, and then I sewed it by machine close to the piped edge. I ironed the seam allowance down and trimmed it away except for the piping seam. I then basted the seam allowance down. I also finished the bottom edge with piping by pinning it and basting it. For the tip, I clipped the piping nearly up to the stitching line and manoeuvred it over the tip. I trimmed the seam allowance. My original plan was to turn that edge inwards for a clean finish, but it was too small at some points, so instead I hand sewed some lace tape on. And that was it for the bodice. I moved on to the sleeves. Although the sleeves on the fashion plate are really pretty, I wanted to go with simple straight sleeves, which seemed more iconic for the 1840s to me. However, I regret this a little now. I love poofy lacy sleeves. Alas, I used the pattern from the cut of women's clothes by Norah Waugh. I made a mock-up, and once I was happy with the fit, I cut it out of the satin. Then I hemmed the bottom edge by hand, turning it inwards twice and sewing it down with a whip stitch. I sewed up the side seam and flat felled it. I pinned the base of the sleeves on, then sewed them by machine. I then turned the seam allowances down and whip stitched it down. The only thing missing from the bodice are the floral decorations, but that is for the next video. I will also go over the skirt and the overskirt. Thank you for watching!